Welcome to Groundbreak 2020. I'm Aleya Chattopadhyay, the Vice President of Marketing here at Procore. I'm excited to welcome you today for our session on strategies for empowering women in construction through allyship and self-actualization. With me today, I have Rebecca Sharp of Balfour Beatty and Dr. Giovanna Brasfield of Flatiron Construction. Both are women who have incredible stories, and they'll be sharing with us today about their journey. I also would be remiss if I didn't take a moment to start by talking about the former Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg and the importance of her life and her work. With her recent passing, I wanted to first talk a little bit and ask each of you to tell me your favorite RBG quote and what it means to you. Rebecca?
Yeah, I'll start with a quote that Ruth Bader Ginsburg used a few times. That actually came from Maggie Kuhn. And the quote is, "Speak your mind even if your voice shakes. When you least expect it, someone may actually listen to what you have to say." And to me, this is all about having the courage and the willingness to speak up. I think kind of my biggest takeaway from this is like, if you don't speak up, it's guaranteed no one is going to hear you. If you don't speak out loud, it's 100% positive that no one's going to hear your thoughts or what you have to say. So having the willingness to put yourself out there will at least give other people the opportunity to respond and hear the value that you have to add.
That's great. Thank you. And Dr. G?
Wow, that was a good one, Rebecca. And there's so many different quotes that she has created as far as the ones that have inspired and empowered women. So the one that to me brings value to my kind of journey: women will only have true equality when men share the responsibility of bringing up the next generation.
Thank you both for that. I think it's so important when we look at women and we look at the ones that have come before us and really paved the way. And some of the things that Ruth Bader Ginsburg did for us, not only in her life, but her work, was to be able to systematize and institutionalize the path for women that are coming. And so I think it's important to share our stories so that we can help bring the next generation with us. I'd like to start by asking each of you how you authentically show up in your feminine space in a male-dominated industry. Rebecca?
Yeah, so my story started in construction specifically about 6 years ago. I have a master's degree in architecture, but even with a master's degree, I was hired into construction as an administrator. And just kind of constantly felt like I had to prove myself in a different way than my male counterparts did. I felt like I had to work harder. I felt like I had to prove myself in a different way to kind of get the same level of respect that my male counterparts did. And at some point, I just kind of realized that I didn't want to have to play the game of figuring out how to fit in and figuring out how to bring, some of that like male energy into my day every day. I wanted to kind of let go of this pressure that I was putting on myself to show up the same that all of my male counterparts were. And really wanted to kind of figure out how to bring my authenticity into my job and kind of show up as myself instead of figuring out how to fit the mold, if you will. So through that, I think really identifying who my allies were was a big part of being able to let go of some of that pressure and figuring out just who those people were that were really my supporters and how they could help me kind of come into myself and show up as myself, knowing that they still have my back. And another kind of big thing that was a big point for me was understanding that I can only control myself. I can't actually control other people, and I can't control what their thoughts are. The only thing I can do is just control myself and how I show up. And so putting focus on that rather than trying to alter other people's opinion of me was a big way that I can just kind of like come into my own authenticity and show up as I am, and other people can kind of take it or leave it, but all I can do is really control myself and how I show up.
It takes a lot of courage to take those first few steps. Rebecca, can you share, did you have to do some inner work, or how did you muster the courage to really take that first step?
Yeah, I did a lot of meditating and journaling and really trying to understand for myself what I am looking for rather than what mold am I trying to fit or what career path has been defined for me, instead of kind of going along with those predetermined options. I wanted to start looking within of what I am looking for, what I want to gain, what is best for me, and what will serve me best. So that took a lot of, like you said, inner work and just my own journaling and meditating to really understand what I have to bring to the table and how I can show up to do that.
Thank you for sharing. It's really important, I think, that people take the time to think about what their career means to them and how they identify themselves and what that looks like. And I think that's always the hard work that, especially as women, that we have to put in. Dr. G, how about you? Can you tell us a little bit about how you found your own feminine space within this male-dominated industry that we live and work in?
Well, for me, mine was I stumbled upon construction, interestingly enough. I found that it was really, really fascinating, especially when it comes to some of the construction work that we are creating, some of the most iconic infrastructure projects throughout the United States as well as in Canada. So coincidentally, I just raised my hand. I was tasked with finding out a little more information about certifications and about diverse firms and figuring out how that it was incorporated within the overall infrastructure of a construction company. And at that time, the industry was evolving. There was more importance and requirements for diversity and inclusion programs or community benefits programs. And so because I've taken not only a position in the efforts for program implementation, but it's something that's dear to my heart as a whole. So I noticed that this was a swing for more diversity and inclusion, and I became to own it and own the space. And because I don't have the traditional type of construction engineering background, I jumped in, meaning I went to the job site. I started aligning myself with the superintendents and foremen who are out there building the work. I started really asking people more about our industry. And since such, my journey has been to take engineering training to understand more so and not be seen as a separator, meaning the backgrounds and experience and upbringing, meaning educationally, but also how do I figure out a way that these barriers are minimal and that I am owning and growing a greater knowledge of construction as a whole. So constant learner, lifelong learner, something that I'm very driven in, and especially when it comes to finding out more information about key topics, especially with construction. I had many, many different mentors, both male and female, that have helped me along my career and gave me some various different pointers. I've also had advocates as well as sponsors, those that would help me, give me the insight of what I need to do to grow as a professional further. And then speaking my truth, that is one of the hardest things I would say to do. But once you get to that point where you're like, okay, I don't know everything, and it's okay. But what is not okay is to stay there in the not knowing. It's actually to partner, to collaborate, and to figure it out and get that information so you can grow as a professional. And then taking those hindrances and turning them into positives. And so, like I said before, kind of how I stumbled on construction is even though I was focusing or have been focusing on the diversity and inclusion component of the puzzle, my goal is to make sure that I still understand every single aspect from the design to the construction to the concrete curation periods and all the details behind building successful projects that are changing our communities.
Thank you. You both bring up some really important topics as it relates to strategies for empowering women and self-actualization, among them allyship, mentorship, really, the inner work that needs to happen. And I think ultimately being able to show up as your own authentic self and voice. And I think that when we are able to do that, we show up as better leaders, as better colleagues, as better employees, and just as better people, because the diversity of voice is then heard and reflected in the important work that the industry is doing. And I think it's hard to get there because I think that so many people get tripped up by what we know as imposter syndrome. And so I want to shift to talk a little bit about that. I know that for me, mentorship is very dear to my heart. I was mentored throughout my career, and now I take great pride in mentoring young women and men. But I know that imposter syndrome can really make people stumble and fall sometimes because they feel like they're not good enough. And I want to talk a little bit about imposter syndrome and what Dr. G mentioned about being a lifelong learner and curiosity, and the fact that imposter syndrome is not something that you one and done and get over it. It's part of being a lifelong learner, and that when you stretch yourself and you try to grow, that you do feel that syndrome. And so, Rebecca, in your experience, have you found yourself needing to code switch or, act more like you were expected to by your colleagues? And can you share your story about imposter syndrome and finding your own authentic voice and self?
Yeah, absolutely. I mentioned earlier some of the inner work that it took for me to come to be kind of at peace at peace with my own self and how I show up. But a lot of it was like I'm a big perfectionist, and I think this industry attracts a lot of perfectionists, type A, maybe some people pleasers, and I had to kind of say like, "Hey, perfectionist self." I see you and I hear you and I appreciate you, but I need you to step aside and let me stumble a little bit, let me make some mistakes along the way, and let me kind of figure out my own path without needing to fit this mold or fit the expectations of what other people have of me. And so kind of allowing myself to figure out how my career would evolve made me or gave me the need to like put the perfectionist self aside a little bit to really allow myself to start to show up as I needed to.
And give yourself permission to do that, right?
Right.
Yeah. I think sometimes we're our own harshest critics.
Absolutely.
If you had to come up with 2 to 3 strategies on how people should think about and deal with imposter syndrome, what would they be, Rebecca?
Yeah, I think you touched on one earlier with just allowing ourselves to grow. And I think a big strategy that I like to mention is maintaining a growth mindset. A fixed mindset is going to kind of keep you where you are, and is the idea that this is the way things are and there's nothing I can really do about it, versus having a growth mindset where you can change your own story, you can change your own situation, you can change what you know, if you allow yourself to grow. So how would you show up differently if you didn't have the self-doubt? Ask yourself that question. What would I do differently if I didn't have low confidence or self-doubt? And how would that allow me to grow differently? So the growth mindset definitely is one. And one I mentioned earlier also, you can't change others' opinions. You can't change others' minds. You can't change anything about other people. You can only change yourself. So really do the work. Do the work for how you want to show up, who you want to be, what you want to bring to the table, what value you have to add. do the work to prove them wrong. All you can do is modify your own behavior. And the last thought I think that I'll leave is the definition of an imposter is someone who shows up as someone else. So you actually cannot be an imposter if you're showing up authentically. Those are you can't do both of those. So if you're showing up authentically, there is nothing about that is possible to be an imposter. So as the more you can bring your true self to the table and evolve and grow and keep learning, just like Dr. G said, the more authenticity you have to bring. So
Wonderful.
Wow.
Thank you. So great. Dr.
That
G?
is so awesome, especially when you talk about showing up authentically, Rebecca, because that's so critical when you're trying to not fall into the imposter syndrome and be pulled, especially as women in profession, in construction, being pulled in so many different ways. But the fixed mindset versus the growth mindset is essential when we're thinking about who we are and who we're going to show up as. I think about my own personal journey and having the permission, like you touched on earlier, is having the permission to say to myself that it's just not a good day. It's just not a good day. And that's okay, right? I remember being in a specific meeting, and I mean, as life as it is, there's so many things going on out there. Social injustice, there's equality for women, there's, just where this country is, COVID. So in the meeting, challenged by the owner, and trying to figure out how to navigate my scope of work with diversity and inclusion, and something, again, that I'm very, very serious and passionate about. So when I remember leaving the meeting, and I just kind of kept that face, the mask on, I call it, the mask on, where everything's perfect, nothing's wrong, but you're dealing with all these things internally. And I stepped out of the room, and then I remember someone asking me, are you okay? And at that moment, I felt it was okay to be vulnerable. Usually I'm like, male-dominated industry, I'm like, no, everything's perfect. I'm all right. The imposter, right? I'm all right. Everything's okay. But it's okay, I felt, to say I'm not okay. I'm human. I'm dealing with these things. My family, my dad is ill, but not vent, but actually take ownership of I'm not okay. I just need a few minutes to get myself together. I'll regroup and come right back into the meeting. And that was okay. So having that ability to be uncomfortable, like you touched on a little bit earlier, Rebecca, was the thing to do. And it's okay in leadership roles, but we're often expected to be strong at all capacities. But that strength is also in vulnerability.
So great. A little bit later on, TUI, our CEO, is going to be in conversation with Brene Brown. And she talks about the fact that it's okay to not be okay. And that to not be okay is actually just the normalization of what we're all going through, and that we all go through that, whether COVID or not. There are moments that will always happen where we're not okay. And so I know that I had one of those moments a couple of weeks ago, and let both Rebecca and Dr. G know, and you both were so kind to me. And I just want to thank you for your kindness and your empathy. Let's talk a little bit about allyship, because I think that allyship is a really important part of this discussion and about the journey to self-actualization. And so, Rebecca, maybe I can start with you again and just talk about, how do you find allies and the importance of allyship as you are trying to actualize your authentic self?
Sure. Allies are going to be by your side when you need them, support you, be a shoulder to lean on if you need, but those that always have your back, whether they're part of your day-to-day or not. And for me, identifying who those people were or are in my career helped me learn so much about communication, about work, about how you show up, like your presence, All of those things are so important. And I had wonderful allies to help teach me along the way. And I feel like one of my biggest things that I learned through that was not allowing my energy to go towards the people who are not my allies, right? There are times where you show up and like humans are not all supposed to get along. That's okay. If we aren't best friends with everyone, that's part of life, but don't put all of your energy into the negativity or people tearing you down or people who aren't your allies, because it doesn't serve you in any way to give your energy towards some of the negativity. All it does is kind of drain you and pull you down. So put your energy towards the things that lift you up and the people that lift you up, and learn to kind of like shake some of the other stuff off, because it just isn't worth your time and isn't worth your energy to put towards it. So
That's great. Thank you. Dr. G, do you want to talk about allyship and what it's meant to you, and the importance of allyship for those of the folks that are listening in and wanting to be an ally or looking for allies?
Absolutely. For me, allyship has served me so many different facets of my life, from even undergrad to currently, the journey in my career to get to where I am. Um, and it's been aligning myself with people who are able to provide feedback and be supportive. For example, I think about one of my allies who managed a huge project pursuit, $1 billion project pursuit. And I was looking to get more of an understanding of our overall industry. So he said, if you come out here, it was about an hour and a half drive. If you come out here, I'll meet with you. And he said, I need you to commit to every week, a minimum, once a week, and for about 3 months. I was like, whoa, hour and a half drive, meet with him. But again, I did it. I jumped in, and I realized if he was willing to invest in me as my ally to help me in my career and getting to becoming a better professional, I would do it. And it was such a valuable experience. Literally, I drove an hour and a half, sat down with him for maybe 45 minutes. And what we did is we reviewed construction scopes, we reviewed construction schedule, and his name is Carl Stanstead. So he's amazing. He's with Skanska, and he was so all in as far as helping me in my career growth. I would never forget that experience, because he didn't look at me like, oh, she's only diversity and inclusion and she's over here and we're not going to put her in these construction meetings. But he actually put a seed within my career to help grow to get to that next level. So he served me very well as an ally and helping me meet different people, various general superintendents that were handling the projects. And so it's critical that we have those allies within our career at all different facets. And we can identify them earlier. Like Rebecca talked about, it's not good to focus on those negative because it's so easy. It's easier, but it's not good. And it doesn't benefit you in your career where you're trying to have it go. So focus and align yourself with those people who, doesn't matter where they're at within their own personal career journey, there's something you can learn from everyone. And figuring out what it is, that's when the light goes on. But again, don't focus, again, just like she said, don't focus on that negative. Focus on how you can be better and better professional.
Because it's like you said, Dr. G, it's like easier to go that route. It's easier to kind of like play the victim or give a reason to be upset or to have a bad day or like have someone to blame for that. That's an easier route for sure.
I also think that it's a lot more fun walking down the street with a gaggle of friends than it is walking alone. And so if you're constantly looking to find someone or point to something to blame or to create negativity, that you're not actually looking towards the light and you're not looking towards the future. And I think for those of you in the audience that are women and men that are interested, please raise your hand to be an ally. You know, I know that we often look for allies in our life, but it's such a gift when somebody just shows up and says, I want to be your ally, or I'm going to speak up on your behalf and make space for your voice. And I think that allyship is really something that builds our confidence and allows us to lean into our authentic self in our journey. So with that, I wanted to just ask each of you as we round the corner at the end of this session to talk a little bit about takeaway lessons for our audience. Dr. G, can I start with you?
Absolutely. So one of the things I think that we've touched on in today's panel breakout is definitely being authentic, being your real self. And that will serve you, volumes within your career. It's okay to say, I'm not okay today. And taking a couple of seconds, minutes, whatever you need to regroup and come back and tackle the world. So from there, I call it the self-education, where you're learning about yourself and learning about how you're feeling. And then also being empathetic for others, aligning yourself with those who you look up to and you admire, within their career, and reaching out and saying, hey, I need an ally. Or you don't even have to use the word. You know what you're doing. Just align yourself with them and figure out how you can be better professional at whatever it is. Ask them if they can have maybe 15 minutes. Right now, if you ask for an hour, it's a little tough and challenging. But if you say 15 minutes, I'm pretty sure you get the 30 and you'll get the time that you want to take away. But be very positioned and strategic in your time when you do finally get that person to talk about it. And it can be regular conversation. It doesn't have to have a whole bunch of interview questions like you're on going to Diane Sawyer, but a really question that's very intentional in your growth.
Great. Rebecca? I always love Dr. G hearing your stories of your allies. I just feel like you've really had awesome people who have helped you in your career, which is such a great story to hear. I think one of my biggest kind of last parting words is don't let a label or a specific identity define you. I think there's so many times that, especially women, but people in general, kind of put themselves into a box. Oh, I'm just a woman in construction, or I'm a woman in construction and I'm super powerful, and I'm, I can put up with all this nonsense. But on either side, woman in construction is still a label, and it's still a specific identity. And so don't allow yourself to be trapped, and don't allow those labels to, don't allow the limiting beliefs that come along with those labels kind of define who you are. Oh, I'm just an administrator, or, oh, I'm a mom, so I can't, or, oh, there's so many kind of labels that we can assign to ourselves that end up limiting us. So being able to kind of grow outside of that and just say, I just am, it's okay that I'm a perfectionist. It's okay that I'm a mother, or whatever it might be. Sometimes allow yourself not to be those things and be okay with that.
I love that. Just, I am.
Mm-hmm. I just am. That's it.
I just am. So amazing. I want to end on back to Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I also selected a quote that I love of hers, and I want to end with that. And the one that I chose is, fight for the things that you care about, but do it in a way that leads others to join you. And so with that, I want to thank both of you for joining me. I want to thank our audience for joining us today. And please be well, be safe, be kind.